the midst of the darkness, you bring light. In the midst of the hurt, you bring comfort. In the midst of our brokenness, you heal us. God, let your word today be a balm to our weary souls. And Lord, let us be different when we leave today. How good you are. We love you. Thank you for letting us be in your presence. It's in your name we pray. Amen. You may be seated.
As you're seated, let me do one quick little announcement that I have to make. We have a call business meeting. We do this every year. It'll be on December 5th at 6 p.m. It's for our budget. We present our budget for 2022. It's a church member only meeting, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, we'd like to invite you to come. It's at 6 o'clock. We'll present the budget for 2022 and vote on it at that time on that Sunday. As Rodney mentioned, we're in week 2 of these stories, and I am telling the story of Esther today. You know, when I think about these stories, I grew up going to church, you know, as a little boy, just all the way growing up. And so sometimes some of these stories in Scripture, what's stuck in my head is the kid version, you know, the 15-minute story that I got in Sunday school growing up, or the little. Some of you may have had this children's Bible story kind of book growing up that your parents read your Bible stories out of, and you know, I have those little stories. Or if you're my age, the felt board that they stuck the little pictures on. If you're old enough, and if you're not, you just missed out. And those were awesome. I want to tell you this story. I want to walk through the Scripture and let you hear all the parts of this story. This is a story. This is definitely a made-for-movie story. Like, it is so many moving parts. It's got intrigue and assassinations and attempts and, you know, so much stuff going on, murder plots. You know, it is a great story. And when we finish the story, I want to tell you why it matters. Okay, there are lessons to be learned from this story for us today. So that's what we're going to be doing all these weeks. Is I'm going to tell you a story and we'll look at these lessons. So our story starts. Chapter 1 of our story is a beauty pageant. We're trying to find a beauty queen. Now, I know all about pageants. I don't know if you're aware, but like, my daughter is going to be in the Miss Mississippi pageant. I don't know if you knew that or not, but you should know it because I'm her dad and I'm up here, and so I'm going to tell you. And I just want you to know that I always knew that I would birth a beauty pageant contestant. Like, I always knew that was in my feet. Don't shake your head. Like, some of you think, no, we didn't. You know. So anyway, our story begins with a beauty pageant. That's really more than a beauty pageant. Let me explain what happened. So, King Artaxerxes, this famous Persian king, you read about him in your history books, if you read, and your history books, and they had captured the Jewish people, and so many of them are living now in Persia, and that's the case right here. And he's holding a big party, a big festival, a big banquet. This lasting weeks, okay? And in the middle of this party, at some point, he wants to show off his woman. So he calls in his queen. Now, it doesn't really say this, but it's very likely that he's wanting her to come in and do something kind of risque or something like, you know, I want to show off my woman to all the men in here. And she says no. She says, no, I am not. There's no way. I'm not doing that. And it makes him so angry. You can read this in verse 12 of chapter 1. I'll just show you some scriptures along the way throughout the story. Chapter 1, verse 12. When the attendants delivered the king's command, she refused. He became furious and burned with anger. He was so mad. What do you mean she told me no? But not only did he get mad, all the other men got worried. Because if she can tell the king no, what's our women going to say? Like, what's going to happen here? And you see this in verse 17. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, there will be no end of disrespect and discord. If we let these women get out of hand, we're in trouble, right? You got to do something about this. This cannot be known. This cannot be tolerated. This can't happen. And so he says, fine, I'll do something about it. So they literally dethroned the queen. We never hear from her again. She's gone, okay? And now a search is made for a new queen. And it goes all over the land. They're looking for a queen. Now, don't think this is just a beauty pageant. This is not just a beauty pageant. These women will have to go through several levels of passing through. They have to be intelligent. They have to be sharp. There's a year-long school for those who make it to that level, who then go through, and they've got to know politics. They've got to know how to conduct themselves in court. They've got to fulfill this role. And the few who get down then are presented to the king, and then he has to like them, get along with them, all this. They're selecting a queen. It's a big, huge process. And so here in this process, we're introduced to the star of our movie, Esther. And so let me read to you in chapter 2, verse 7 of Esther. It says, Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So their cousin, I don't know exactly that word, but obviously she lost her parents. He's obviously older than her to some degree, but he's taking her in, he's raising her, and seeing himself as her dad, and taking on that role. Now, don't think it's weird that she has two names, Hadassah and Esther. That's a common thing. In fact, just this week, Nathan, my son, who works in a Chinese church here in Birmingham, in Alabama, he said, he told me, he was telling us a story about someone in his church. He said her name is Wendy, and then he says, well, that's her English name. And I laughed. I said, what's her Chinese name? He said, you can't say it. And so I was like, okay, Wendy. All right, so that's a common thing for people to do. Like if your name might not be easy to pronounce in some other language, so they take on a name. So she's taken on a Persian name, and he tells her when she's picked. She's picked as they come through the town. This is a lovely young lady. Let's take her. Let's see if she can measure up. He says, don't tell these people that you're a Jewish person, that your name is Hadassah, that you come from this. They don't know. They're not going to recognize. Don't let anybody know. So from this point, nobody knows. Nobody knows her heritage or anything like that. And she passes through all the tests. She goes from level to level. She wins over kind of the gatekeepers to the situation, the people who are in charge. They think she's awesome, so they keep working with her. Like she's got a lot of potential. Let's work with her. And eventually she's chosen. Chapter 2, verse 17, it says, now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. End of chapter 1 of our story, our book, our movie. We found the unicorn. So now Esther is queen. Now chapter 2 of our story seems like it's a side note, but I want you to file it away because it comes back later in our story. Now Mordecai, he worries about Esther. He worries about how she's doing. So every day he would go to the gate of the palace where all the workers went in and out. And they worked out a system where there were people at the gate that he could pass notes in, and they would get to her. She could pass notes out. And it was just like, how are you doing? How's everything going? All that kind of stuff. He's just checking up on her and all this stuff. So he would go down there every day. I don't know if he was retired. I don't know if he was independently wealthy. I don't understand how, he could just go hang out there every day, but he did. In the course of him hanging out there, a couple of things happened. One thing that happened was he overheard a couple of the officials who were the gatekeepers talking about a plot to assassinate King Xerxes. And so chapter 2 of our story is this assassination attempt. And so he gets word to the right people, and passes it through. They uncover the plot and expose these men, and they're dealt with, they're executed, all that happens, okay? It's a side note. If you're reading the story, you go through, you go like, okay, so what, right? It just seems like a pass-through. And now we get to chapter 3 of our story, which is the bad guy, okay? Here's the bad guy. The bad guy is a guy named Haman. And so we're going to talk about Haman's plot. Now, you got to know Haman. I almost told him, put a picture of Jafar up there. You know, we need a good, Aladdin, the bad guy. Like, that's what I picture in my mind. I don't know what the guy looked like, but that's what I picture in my mind. He's the bad guy. And he is second in command. Like, he's a very important official. He's got lots of money. He lives, right near the palace. Maybe like next door, like right there close. And he is in and out of the palace all day long. So he would come through the entryway to the gate, and every time he came by, all the people would bow to him like you would bow to the king. But Mordecai wouldn't bow. He's a Jew. So he worships the Lord God. He doesn't believe in bowing to anyone other than God, so he refuses to bow. Well, this infuriates him. He can't stand it. It makes him so angry that Mordecai won't bow to him and show him deference. And so he begins his plot to get rid of Mordecai. I'm going to have this guy killed. All I got to do is figure out something to pin on him to make this happen. I got to figure out something. And then he begins to notice in his travels and as he investigates that there are other people in the realm who don't bow. And the connection is they're all Jews. They're all from the same, religious and actual background, bloodlines of Mordecai. And so it's not just him, it's his family, his cousins, his brother, all those people, they won't bow down. And so he says, we got to get rid of this people. So in chapter 3, verse 6, he says, yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. So he goes to King Xerxes, and he says, let me read it, verse 8. There's a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. And this is kind of a lie. They don't obey the king's laws. Well, there are certain laws they don't obey that are religious laws, and one of them is they don't bow down. He says, so if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. Now, this is millions of dollars. Like, so he's rich, and he says to the king, if you'll just pass the law, and when I say pass the law in there, the king just enacts the law, okay? If you'll enact the law, I'll fund it. I'll pay for it. And I'll put the money up, and it'll happen. You don't have to spend any money. You just have to make it happen. And so he says, fine with me. I trust you. You go with that. He signs it into law. And so verse 13 in chapter 3 says that these dispatches were sent out by couriers all through the provinces. And what they said was, it's an order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women, little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. So this day is coming. They set a date. On that day, any of you have a problem with any of these Jews, right now, between now and then, figure out who they are. Let's earmark them, find out who they are, and when the day comes, on that day, you have permission to kill them, take their stuff. Okay? Well, the Jewish people are distraught. This law's been passed. Haman's gotten his way. We're all going to be killed. We know our death date, right? And they're all upset. Now, Esther figures out, she realizes something's wrong, but she doesn't know what's going on. She's in the palace. They don't know she's a Jew. She doesn't understand what's going on. she's passing notes to Mordecai, he sends into her the edict and lets her know we're in deep trouble. Like, you need to do something. You need to do something. She goes, I can't do anything. What are you talking about? I have no power. I can't do anything. She's like, you're the queen. Do something. And he says to her, look, you're a Jew too. If they find out you're a Jew, you're going to be killed too. Like, you're not just getting away with this. And so then she tries to explain to them. She says, you don't understand the rules. You can't go before the king unless he summons you. If you just walk into the court, the law says you're to be executed. You understand? Anybody who walks into the court is executed. There's one provision. He has a gold scepter. If you walk in, they're going to grab you and they're going to start pulling you out. And if he holds out the scepter to you, they'll stop and let you live. So you just take your life into your hands if you walk in there. You have to go through channels and get an invitation to come in. All right, so then she tells him, she says, you have to understand, that goes for me too. I'm his wife. I haven't seen him in a month. I haven't seen him in a month. Like in our culture, like it's to his whim. Like he's in charge. If he wants to see me, he sends for me. If he doesn't want to see me, he doesn't want to see me. Right? So she explains this to him in chapter 4, verse 11. All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. But Mordecai keeps pushing. And he says to her this phrase that to me means the most in the book. In verse 14, he says, but who knows that you have come to royal position for such a time as this? Esther, you got to understand, I don't think this is coincidence. This isn't luck. This isn't blessing. This isn't just that you weren't just born beautiful and smart and filled with social graces. You weren't just born that way. Maybe God made you this way and set this all up so that you could be where you are, so that right now, when your whole entire family of people is going to be wiped out, that you can do something about it. She says, you're right. You're right. I don't believe in coincidences either. I don't. So she says, I'll tell you what. You're right. I'm probably going to die anyway. If they find out I'm a Jew, I'm dead, so I might as well die now. So here's what I'll do. I'll go in. I'll risk my life and walk in and make my request. But when I do, if I'm going to do this, I want everybody to start praying. So she says this in verse 15. Esther sent this reply. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do, and when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. I'll do it. But it's going to be bathed in prayer if I do this. The 3 days passes. They've all been praying. She risks her life. She walks into the inner court. When she goes in, they're ready to pounce. He extends the gold scepter. Of course, if we didn't, it'd be a short movie, right? He extends the scepter, asks her what she wants. She says, I just would like to have a special lunch for you. I'm going to fix your favorite meal, and I want to dress all up for you. And it's going to be lovely. And I would just like you to come. And I would like you to bring Haman with you. Can we do this tomorrow? He says, I love this idea. Other people might not, but I love spam, so I'm coming. And it's probably not spam. Okay, so we're going to have the banquet. It's going to be lovely. And so he's invited to lunch the next day. Haman is over the top. Like, he thinks this is the greatest thing that ever. Like, not only am I kind of in this position, but I sense now I'm in the inner circle. I mean, the queen herself is inviting me to a private lunch, and we're going to have this banquet, you know. And so they go and they have the lunch. And at the lunch, he says, my queen, what do you desire? What do you want? And she goes, well, I have a special announcement. What I really want is I want us to do this again tomorrow. I'm going to have another spread for you tomorrow. And I just want you and Haman to come back tomorrow. And tomorrow when you come, then I'll ask you what I want. Today, I want us to just enjoy the meal. I don't want to make my request. I'll make it tomorrow. He says, that's a great idea. You realize that somebody's always asking the king for things. So imagine a banquet where, like, okay, nothing's required of me, nothing's asked of me, just enjoy this meal. I'll come back tomorrow and you can ask me. Perfect. Haman goes home this afternoon. He is so happy. He can't wait to get home. So he's going to go home. He's going to tell his wife and his family, you're not going to believe this. I got invited to lunch. She fixed this lunch for me, the queen, private lunch. It was wonderful. But of course, when he leaves the palace to go home, what happens? He passes by Mordecai, who won't bow down to him. Now he's even more angry, because now he feels even more special. And he just can't wait. I know I've got the law passed. He's going to die in just a few weeks, but I don't know if I can wait. This guy makes me so angry. So he goes home and he's telling his wife and his family. He's saying, oh, you know, I should be happy. I want to be happy, but I'm torn because I'm so mad. And they say, why don't you just get rid of him now? Why don't you just get rid of him? If you're this close to the king, why don't you just go in the morning and when you meet with him say, can we just go ahead and off this guy? He's driving me nuts. Can we just hang? Look, we got a big yard here. Let's just build an instrument of execution right here in the yard. We'll make it 75 feet high. It'll be high enough, this is several stories high, that everybody around can see it. Now, your scripture may actually call it gallows, and this might be an English interpretation. When they see this, they might think of, you know, the hangman's rope. But more than likely in their culture, it was actually a big, you know, a pole that went up, and at the point, at the top, it was pointed, and they would literally impale someone on the pole. Kind of disgusting, but it's an instrument of execution. That's what it's for. So whatever, you know, they built this thing. So he tells them this after. He's a rich dude. He's already put up millions of dollars to, you know, have the other stuff done. He's a rich dude. So he tells his people they get to work on it. They're building it that afternoon. It's going up. He feels better now. He feels better. And he can sleep now. But the king couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep that night. And so he says, I'm just exhausted. So he asks his people to read to him. Let's find some of the most boring things that I can hear. So maybe as you read it to me, I'll go to sleep. So he asked them to take the history books. Sorry for all you history lovers. But he wants the chronicles of his, you know, realm to be read to him. So here he is in the middle of the night, and they're reading to him. It says he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. Now it just so happens that while they're reading to him, because he can't sleep, that night, while the gallows are being built, you know, have been built next door to kill Mordecai, it says, it was found recorded there that Mordecai, remember way back earlier, Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. And the king went, I forgot about that. What did we do for old Mordecai? What did we do for that guy? Did we give him a plaque? Was there a ceremony? What did we do? And they told him, we didn't do anything. You know, we just said, appreciate it, and let it go. And he goes, well, that's not right. We got to do something for this guy. So, Haman can't wait to get to work the next morning. He's getting up, he's going in because this morning he's going to ask the king, can he have Mordecai killed? The king, he's there this morning thinking, I've got to honor Mordecai. Oh my goodness. And so he says, is anybody here yet? They said, Haman's just got here. He got here early today. He says, call him in. Haman comes into him and he says, hey, what would you do? What should the king do to honor someone that he wants to honor? Well, Haman, in his pride, thinks he's talking about him. Who else would the king want to honor but me? You know? And so he thinks of all the things he would love. He said, well, I think you should take your robe and put it around this man. I think you should get your horse and put him up on your horse. And I think someone should guide this horse through the streets, and you should have your trumpeters out in front. You should blow the trumpets, and an announcement should be made as they're walking through. This is the man the king wants to honor. See what he's done for him. The king says, love it. This is fantastic. I want you to do it for Mordecai. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Oh, my gosh. Haman is totally disgusted, depressed, upset. Can you believe this? He showed up this morning on cloud nine. He's gonna go ahead and get Mordecai killed, and now he's leading him through the streets, announcing, here's the one somebody wants, the king wants to honor. He's mortified. He is so upset. They go through all the streets. They spend all morning doing this. And then he goes home dejected in despair. And as he gets home, he goes to his wife, and he's just like distraught. He's crying, weeping, angry. The whole round. Angry, depressed, upset, everything. He's like, can you believe this? I've been humiliated. I feel humiliated that this has happened. How am I going to... Y'all suggested I build this thing and go ask the king, and then the king turns it around. Like, it's not accident that that's what he read that night, right? Well, as soon as he's home and he's explained this, the limo pulls up. It's time to go to lunch, right? There's no limo. Okay, all right, they show up and go, it's time. The queen's banquet's about to start, like you're invited to. It's time. And so now he's got to get himself together, Does my hair look right? And they take him to the second lunch with Esther. And so they sit down, they're having lunch. He's kind of distraught, he's upset. The king's enjoying himself, he thinks everything's great. Esther's sitting there, and the king says, okay, tell me now, what is it you want? He's feeling so good. He enjoyed lunch yesterday. They've been hanging out together. He's having a good time. Esther, what do you want? She says, here's what I want. I just want to live. He said, what do you mean? She said, I just want to live. I would like my life to be spared because someone is going to kill me and my family. The king says, ain't no one going to kill you. I'm the king. What are you talking about? Who would do something like that? What idiot, what crazy person would dare threaten the life of the queen? She said, him. He said, what? Haman's like, what? What do you mean? This vile, treacherous man right here is plotting to kill me. He said, what? He said, this whole thing, the law with the Jews, that's me. I'm a Jew. My family. You're talking about me. I'm to be killed. The king is furious. You know how this happens. It happens in government all the time, and it happens in all kind of businesses. We make a law, a rule to solve a problem, and we create bigger problems. that we hadn't thought through, right? We do this all the time. Happens all the time. Oh, we're going to do this because it's going. Oh, and it creates all this mess over here. Haman didn't do his research. He didn't know. Nobody knew that Esther, who's risen to this position, who has the king's favor, that he is a Jew. He didn't know. If he'd have known, he'd never signed. He's mad at himself. I'm sure he's mad at himself for signing this thing, for not realizing that Haman is being petty and personal, and that's why he did it. He sold it to him as this, national situation, but it was personal and petty. He's so angry, he storms out of the room. Goes out on the balcony. Oh, somewhere else. Just to blow off steam for just a minute. While he does that, Esther sits down on her couch in the room. Well, that went well. Haman throws himself at her. Jumps on the floor beside her. He's grabbing her. Please, please, please. He's begging for his life. You got to do something. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Like, we got to help me, please. Like, he's so mad at me, and he's begging. And he's sitting here, he's grabbing her, begging her. And the king blew off his steam in his 1 minute of steam and comes back in the room. Well, when he comes back in the room, here's Haman, and he's got a hold of his wife. You don't do that. He says, excuse me, first you're trying to kill her, now you're going to molest her first? I'm like, what are you doing? So there's a eunuch in the room. The eunuchs were guards specially set aside to guard the queen and her maids. This eunuch standing here, and he is living like he knows what's going on. He's part of her team. He's her secret service person. So he's on her side. And so he's sitting there furious about what's going on. And he says, excuse me, King, I happen to know that there is an instrument of execution just a block away. You can't miss it. It's 75 feet high. And the king says, perfect. Put him on it. And so we're at the final chapter. And the final chapter is they take Mordecai and they take Haman. And Haman, the evil guy, is hung, killed, executed on the thing he built for Mordecai. Wow. Well, it's not the end of the story. You see, the law of the Medes and the Persians can't be changed. Can't be changed. That's why when you read the story of Daniel, he's thrown in the lion's den. You read in that story. That's in Persia too. They're in this same kind of time frame, and they made a law that couldn't be changed. That's why he was thrown in. Same thing. You can't change the law. But here's what we'll do. We'll pass another law, and here's what this law says. This law says that all the Jews on that day will be armed to the teeth. Like, this is a culture where they can't have weapons. We're going to make sure they all have weapons, and we're going to let them defend themselves. And in fact, all the people who over the course of time, of these weeks right here, have already let it be known that they're the ones that are going to annihilate the Jews, we're going to let them defend themselves. And in fact, we'll just reverse it. If you want to kill them, you can take their stuff. And so the day comes, and instead of the Jews being wiped out, all their enemies are wiped out. So let me share with you these last few words. I want you to know these things. Number one, God will accomplish his purposes. God has a plan for your life. He has a plan for the world, and he will accomplish his purposes. Second thing, there are no coincidences. Whatever's going on, God is setting up to do what he has planned. Third, who knows but that you are where you are to accomplish God's purposes. Where you work, where you live, that you're there for a specific time, for a specific purpose, for a specific people. It's not just happenstance. You weren't made as beautiful and intellectual and full of social graces as you are, except to do something that God has in store for you to do. The question is, will you do it? Will you risk whatever needs risking to do what God wants you to do? Two more things. One, sometimes the thing that you think will crush you is a pathway to blessing. It's not there to crush you. Someone else may need for it to crush you, but God can take even that and bless you. God can work through all those things to accomplish His purpose. And finally, I'll say this. There comes a time to do His will that you stop and you get your friends and family and you say, I just want everybody to pray. Will y'all fast and pray for me? Because I got something coming up. And I want God's purpose and God's plan to prevail. Because it's God who can make the king extend his scepter to you. So I don't know what's going on in your life, but when I read this story, I know that God has a plan. You want me to tell you something amazing? The Jewish people celebrate this story today. It's an annual festival. It's called the Festival of Purim. Next year it happens on March 16th and 17th. Because of what God did through one person to save their people. Well, what will God do through you to accomplish His purpose? Will you let Him? Will you risk it? Let me pray for you. Will you bow your head with me? Dear Lord, I pray that we will follow you no matter what. We will know that you have a plan, you have a purpose, and we're in on it, God. We want to accomplish those things. We don't believe in coincidences either. So Lord, may you do your will, and may we be willing to be used by you. In Jesus' name, amen. Will you stand with us as we sing today?